to the B-Sound Podcast. Come on, B-Sound Podcast.
Welcome to the B Sound Podcast. Today our guest is Josh Terry. Josh seems to be a jack of many creative trades, a musician, a TikTok sensation, a Bitcoin enthusiast, and he's writing a book currently and recently started a fantastic podcast. Hey, Josh, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. So, Josh, if you don't mind, let's start out and let the listeners know, who are you?
I'm an artist. I'm a creative person. I'm a creative type. I grew up in the music world and making lots of visual art as well. And I've come to all of my other activities sort of from that lens of the creative person. And I'm a person who explores ideas. I'm very passionate about learning theory and overall concepts of self-betterment. And that's the basic idea of who I am.
Yeah, that sounds pretty close to what you put out there too, I think. I came across you on TikTok. I think maybe that a large portion of your audience might have. With TikTok, well, how did you get started with TikTok? Do you mind just going with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And yes, a lot of the folks that I've come in contact with, it's come through TikTok, which has just been amazing. It's been an incredible journey already, and it feels like it's just the beginning. But I've made content for years. I've made content of different sorts. I started on YouTube and Twitter, Instagram, whatever. I've as an artist, as a creative, it sort of was just a natural part of the process for me, of the things that I did. And most of the content that I made was around music. I did that for years and years, and some around visual art. And it never took off. And I'd say most of the reason why, we could explore that more, but most of the reason why was essentially my perfectionism. I kind of, that was my big, place of stuckness that I would find myself in. And the journey into TikTok was a friend of mine who he runs his business online, and so he's also very much in the online world. He's like, man, you got to get on this new platform, TikTok. And I'm like, another social platform? Do I have to? That was kind of my initial reaction. Because at that time I was pretty burnt out on all of it. I was a little discouraged with that, the life of the creative, if you will.
Yes.
And it took me a long time, but I was also at a period when I was like really getting my life together, and I was focusing in on really basic things to get myself functional. But one day I was like, all right, whatever, I'll check this app out, because he'd told me about it like 20 times. And so I downloaded it on my phone at 11 p.m. And I messaged him at like 3 a.m. and I was like, well, shit. It was, I just went down this rabbit hole, and, TikTok is the most addictive thing I've ever seen in terms of just, engagement. It's just a fascinating place to explore. So, I explored it, and as I said, I was in the midst of, getting my life together. So 3 a.m. bedtime was not my plan. So I started creating some stuff on there once I downloaded and seen how impressive it was. And I made the typical stuff that I always did. And it did as badly as it always had done. And that was the norm for me. So it wasn't, wildly upsetting. But also, I wanted to do better than that. But I just kept working on my life. My life had a year or two before then really fallen into shambles, and I was doing really simple, the pay off the debt, eat the good food, take the walks, do the exercise, learn how to make your life better, just by little steps. And in the midst of that, I started getting my mental health back, and I started getting essentially my mental clarity back. I had some diet issues and other issues that were causing, amongst other things like depression and fatigue, extreme mental fog. And I just didn't have the clarity that I knew I could have. I always knew that my mind was my strength, but I would come to a problem that I just couldn't solve it. It was, and it felt like being a runner with like a bad ankle or something. It was a horrific feeling. But that was the state I was in actually for many years. But that started to clear, and I started to think more clearly. I started to dive into the financial world. I started to invest for myself. I started to just get my act together across many different areas. And one day I just kind of gave up on the content creation process as I had normally done. I don't want that to sound binary, because one day I finally decided. It was a process that got me there, but I gave up on my original type of things that I would make, and I was just that day working on a spreadsheet on real estate, and it was something that I thought was ridiculous. And I'd done, I think, just the average numbers on home buying. And I was thinking about the phrase, a house is the greatest investment you'll ever make. And it was, proving itself to be very false by just the basic average data. And it's like, yes, a house is a good investment if you beat the averages, if you do it if you do better than normal. But it's not just a blanket true statement. And I just thought that was ridiculous. And I said, well, hell, I'll write a video about that. And the very first thing that I made went viral. And I think there was a series of things connected to that, of why that type of material would have gone viral. But essentially, it was this process of, getting my life together, getting my mental clarity back, and sort of giving up on my perfectionism and a bunch of other things, which we can talk about if you like, to let myself kind of let go and just make stuff about essentially what was on my mind.
Interesting. I've had a kind of a similar journey to you, to be honest, at least in that respect, because in the past year or so, basically when the pandemic came, it's like, hey, it's time to get my life together a little bit more. And the content I'm making, it was doing okay. I'd get a thing here or there that hit, but it's pretty disappointing as a musician to like constantly put your heart and soul into it, be a perfectionist, and not get anything. And someone came to me one day and said, hey, perfection is the enemy of art, and it's like, well, yeah, I guess so. And I don't have anything like you where it's, I've seen like you have like one video that's got like 4.3 million views or something like that. And that's pretty awesome. I guess my point being, do you agree with that? Do you think perfection is the enemy of art?
I do. With music, it was something I gotten it so ingrained that I couldn't break out of it inside of music. It was, I had to switch sort of subjects for me to break out of things that I knew weren't serving me. I knew I could see my perfectionism at that point. I knew that it was affecting me in terribly negative ways. But sometimes it's just so hard to break habits in a field that you've studied a lot, because they're so ingrained. So I actually I broke out of it into a different subject, and that enabled me to do it. And now I still make music. I'm still exploring music, and I'm slowly breaking some of my perfectionist habits within music as a result of that. And yeah, it's like, I've learned long before this that and I mean, we know this to be true, that one of the worst things you can do, for example, in music, if you're a writer, is to imagine a piece of music and try to make it. That's one of the worst things you can possibly do. And the reason why I say it that way, I mean, there's ways where it can work out, but what I'm getting at by that is, let's say you're a music producer. So you imagine a beautiful piece of music with all of these beautiful sounds in it. Well, here's the thing is, your brain can imagine infinite sounds.
True.
Your skill level cannot execute on infinite sounds, ever.
Fair, very fair.
That's never an option. So as a result, if it's sort of this like envisioning process and then creation process, where that's always the way you do it, then the envisioner, let's call it, the part of you that establishes a vision sort of becomes an oppressor, where it's like you never can measure up to it, but you always have to obey it. You always have to try to seek to match it. And some people, it's fine. Some people, they don't get a resentful sort of attitude around that part of their being, and that's okay, right? They manage to function through it. But for other people, they feel like they just get crushed by their own dreams and visions for what they could create because they can never match up to them. So the way I say it now is, one of the best things you can do is make a piece of music and then notice it. And that's one of the most productive things you can do as a creator, is to just make something and then go, look at that. and on the back end, after it's done, then go, well, would I like to make another thing sort of like that? Or would I like to make something different? How could I make the next one a little bit better? You ask some questions like that, but you don't create this, oppressive idea of what the thing could be, and that's impossible to create. But not only that, it's like you have no data that could have ever told you that it was possible in the first place, because your mind can come up with anything, right?
Sure.
So it's like, that's the first way is perfectionism, and the second way is letting go of the perfectionist ideal, the vision, and going, okay, here I am in this mess. Let's make something and, see if it could maybe be delightful a little bit. And
sure,
who knows where that would take us.
For real. Yeah. I mean, I have people ask me all the time. I'm a fairly prolific songwriter, and people ask me all the time, how do you get over writer's block? And it's like, just write. Just don't care if you're writing the crappy song, just let it out. And if it's a bad song, don't show anybody, whatever. But the idea is, don't let perfectionism get in your way, because that's what's stopping you, is you're afraid of being not perfect.
Absolutely. I'm a really big fan of Seth Godin's quote. There is no fear of there is no writer's block. There is only fear of bad writing.
Huh.
And it's like, man, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's not like you're, incapable of, pushing out some mushy creation that's, not quite the thing that measures up to what you'd like to be. You're capable of doing that anytime you want.
Sure.
But what we don't realize is that, if we do that every once in a while, if we do that regularly, if we do that often, pretty soon it's not mushy. Pretty soon it's an amazing creation.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess that goes into the concept of trusting the process, right? We have to be willing to, have some degree of essentially faith that the act of creating things that don't match up to the best we could imagine it to be will result in something possibly even better than we could imagine.
Speaking of which, so do you ever have a point of, like, let's say you're creating a TikTok video. Do you ever have the videos that you think, oh, these are going to hit really well and they don't? Or the opposite way where it's like, I didn't expect that to hit at all and it did really well, besides the obvious first time you went viral?
Absolutely. I do feel that I'm slowly getting a sense for the things that people will respond to. But I spoke earlier about this idea of giving up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't mind, I'm gonna go into that a little bit because I think it's relevant to this. First of all, I mean, to connect it to this is, who the hell do we think we are that we would know what other people want? That we're that brilliant, and we really like to think that we are, but half the time we're not, maybe 3/4, depending on, how much practice we've had. We very rarely actually know what the other person wants. And a lot of our perfectionism gets invested in this idea of like, oh, I've got to make this perfect thing that other people are going to like, and I know exactly what that is. No, you don't. You have no clue. And it's like, I like to think of myself as a fairly smart fellow, but I'm just not that smart. I don't know what everybody's going to like. And that was one of the things that I started to let myself give up on. And I use the phrase give up in a very positive context because I've noticed that there's a lot of lessons and ideas that we absorb that they look good on the surface, but they become religious ideals that we have to live up to that we can't. So they actually don't serve us. They harm us. And when we give up on those things and we kind of take stock of where we're at and we go, okay, what could this, little person that's here that can't do that much, what could this person do? I think that is an incredibly empowering experience. It has been for anyone that I've spoken to about it, that I've helped them sort of go through this process, is to look at, your belief that you should be making something at this level of perfection, your belief that you know what other people want, the belief that you know what you want, the belief that your dream is something that you're going to enjoy, the belief that you can achieve your dreams. All of these things, they're all great if they move you forwards. If they don't move you forwards, what the hell are they there for? They're all things that are, used in like self-help and motivational spaces to help people move forwards. And sometimes they work, right? So like, it's a partial positive here where it's like, have a dream. Great. If you have a dream and it inspires you to work hard and move forwards towards that dream, wonderful. But if you have a dream and you feel sad because you're not like your dream, you feel sad because you're not living the life of your dream, and it's making you slow and depressed, and you're not responding well, and you're working less hard, that belief about your dream is not serving you. So this idea of giving up is the idea of like, sometimes you can give yourself that little bit of an ego death of giving up on these beliefs and dreams that aren't serving you, and then taking on some that serve you. And one that I think was really big is we start to build up ideas of what people want. And if we are willing to face up to ourselves and go, hey, you're not really that smart. You're not really all that adept at observing people. Yeah, you're a people watcher. Yeah, you have some insights, but you don't really know. then you can kind of have the humility to, well, if you have the humility to accept those things, then you usually feel a little bit of those, shackles of perfectionism let go. And you feel the capability to present something that people might not like. Because if you don't know what people like, then it's okay to present something that people don't like. If you think you know what people like, it's unforgivable for you to present things that people don't like.
Mm. That makes sense.
Unforgivable in your own mind, of course, is what I meant by that.
It's a lot to process.
I agree. I mean, it was one of the harder things for me.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of, well, it sounds so counterintuitive. It sounds so counterintuitive to like every motivational speech you have ever heard is like, give up on your dreams.
Yeah, right. It's not, yeah.
And essentially that was what I did. Like when I hit one of my lowest points, I essentially, I wanted to be a rock star, and I wanted, all of these things that you sometimes want when you pursue the arts. And,
mm-hmm.
I wanted the typical glamorous things you would want with that. And I didn't give up on the sense of saying, okay, this could never happen.
Right.
I gave up on it in the sense of, well, I can't do this. I obviously am not currently capable of this. And see, even that, like somebody that loves affirmations would love to like catch me and say, hey, no, you can't do that yet, right? They'd love to like say a phrase like that. And it's like, no, let's face up. Let's face up to who you are and what you're capable of. And it was like, I'm not here. I'm not at the thing I want. And I'm not even close. It's like, I'm not even on the road. I'm on the road to ruin. I'm in credit card debt. I'm sad. I'm broke. I'm poor. I'm frustrated. I'm depressed. I'm sick. I had all sorts of things going wrong with me at that time of my life. And it's like, okay, let's face up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's obviously a much bigger problem than, me not being rock star or whatever,
Right.
So being able to give up on my dreams, where I said, you know what, maybe I'll never achieve that. And if I never achieve that, and I live the life that I'm living right now, I will live the rest of my life in hell, and I'll die in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sounds horrific.
Yeah.
If I hung on to my dreams, I could have done this little trick that all of us artists do, which is, well, you know what? When I have my big break, I'll fix everything. It's okay that my life is in shambles right now. When I have that big break, I'll go fix it. I couldn't do that if I gave up on it. I had to face it. I had to face the fact that I was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, I was able to start working on those things. And I had to work out my life such that even if none of my dreams come true, I can still live a fulfilling life. I can still live a good life. So I started trying to create a good life for myself. And one of the funniest things is that viral video that I mentioned that, sort of kicked off the new form of stuff that I started making and started, a whole new adventure for me.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen until I didn't need it.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. Actually, you hear people say, like, once they let go, the big thing happens.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Because I became a more sane person. And more success generally comes to more sane people.
Right. I mean, it's almost like if you can reevaluate who you are every so often, it gives you a chance to be like, well, is this a lie I'm telling myself, or is this something that, and what can I do to improve myself now? Which sounds like something you've done. Like I remember watching your TikToks and being like, oh, this guy's on a similar journey as I am. Like you were doing like cold exposure. I remember you doing a TikTok on that. And I was doing the same thing at the same time, like going out in the cold and really exposing myself to it and getting used to being uncomfortable in that particular way. And it was very helpful. All those things are helpful.
Do you mind if I ask, what has your journey been like with cold exposure? I'm fascinated by it. I think it's incredible.
Well, right now it's hot outside, and I haven't really tried the cold showers, but all winter long, I'd go outside for at least 5 minutes and just sit there and try to meditate and be, and kind of feel the cold as well, but not just absorb the pain of it and be okay with it. That's basically was my journey, was learning to be okay with being uncomfortable. And it really helped me be more okay with being uncomfortable. Like for instance, this podcast is me trying to step out of my comfort zone and become more social and really get to learn from other people that I admire and want to learn from. So, and that's why I'm doing this now. So yeah, the cold exposure has been really a journey of dealing with discomfort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been the same for me.
Yeah.
It's been utterly rewarding. It's one of the top practices I've ever engaged in is to, breathing exercise and cold exposure, learning to deal with the cold, learning to accept it, essentially, where you can, go into an uncomfortable thing and in your mind very, very clearly know that you voluntarily stepped into something uncomfortable. And it's not pleasant. And you're in it and you're fine.
Yeah.
And knowing that just has a magical effect where you step out of it and you realize, oh, I can handle more than I thought. I'm stronger than I thought I was. Mm-hmm. It's an incredible practice.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree very much. I feel like before that, I was much more of a victim than I am now. Like I just let little things get to me that now it's like, oh, I can handle that. I can handle being out in below zero. I can handle whatever little thing comes along. So yeah, it's a lot of value, the cold exposure. Anyway, I have a few questions here I wanted to ask. Oh, well, first of all, what kind of music do you do? Is it, you mentioned being a rock star, but is that like, I know that on your TikToks, you play a lot of, nice piano, that you're playing behind some of it. And, what kind of music are you into? Like what?
Yeah, I have a very long history in music. I studied classical music growing up. And I think my first piece of excitement around music was film scoring. I got very into film music and I wanted to be a film score composer. And over time, I started just enjoying the stuff that was on the radio and just simple pop music, simple, standard radio hits,
Sure.
And over time, I decided, I wanted to explore stuff like that. I studied violin primarily in school. So I went through a phase where I was doing tons of loop station stuff, sort of related to like Kishi Bashi, Andrew Bird, Owen Pallett, people like that, loop violins and sing kind of a thing. I did that for a long time. Probably my favorite band in the world is Coldplay. It's a simple thing, but they make me happy, Yeah. And I don't know. I had a weird response to the depth of music school by sort of wanting something that was light and simple and straightforward. And I really enjoy simple music, because I guess maybe it's not the place to go for me to think, right?
Right.
Maybe I think enough. Maybe it's something like that. I don't know exactly, but I enjoy music that, just makes me feel good. So, I mean, at the moment, I don't listen to a lot of music at the moment. I'm very much enjoying my podcasts and books and stuff. But when I do, it's, I enjoy Avett Brothers, Mumford and Sons, Nine Inch Nails, Radiohead, Alt J, and then the electronic world. I love. It's a rare thing, and I almost want to start a project just to see more of this music in the world. Is Electro Blues. I love Electro Blues. I was influenced. Blues, I think, was the first time I started to grab any sense of artistry in my life. I always say that, like, Bach made me able to play. Like, he gave me technical abilities, but blues gave me the ability to sing, and I mean that in the artistic sense.
Yeah. Like with soul kind of thing.
Yeah. I love blues. I think that's a pretty good summary.
That's cool. Well, you said you're into the podcasting thing now. How did that come about?
Well, it came about from too much music, actually. I was a music teacher, and I was a music teacher for about 8 years, and I spent so much time, in the building. I'm an introvert, and it's tons of, sensory overload to be around, a whole passel of kids and hearing music all day. So when I would get in my car, the last thing I'd want to do is turn on the radio. The last thing I'd want to do is listen to music. So I started listening to podcasts. And I call that sort of my second education, is every day driving to and from work, and at different commutes at different times, but it was usually over a half-hour commute, where I would listen to podcasts always, on the way there and on the way back, and I just learned so much, and I came to love the platform, love the way of doing things that podcasts are, and it made me want to someday do it, which I'm really happy that I've started to go in that direction myself. But yeah, they've been a huge gift for my life.
Yeah, I really enjoy your podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. The last guest I heard you have on was Simon Squibb, and I thought that was a pretty enlightening conversation. I'm curious, how do you pick your guests?
I'm exploring a lot of different areas, but I'm very interested in mental models and learning theory, self-development, and then the financial world. And I think that the financial world ties into those things, but it's also, for a lot of people, kind of separate. But those are kind of the areas that I find myself in. So anybody that I think can add to any of those concepts, I'm interested in talking to, which is a very wide range, because some of those things, particularly learning theory and mental models, are applicable to any field of life. It makes for a lot of fun that, I don't feel limited in who I pick, because we can all meet on this common ground of, okay, it's not what you're doing, but it's how you think about what you're doing. And let's see if we can pick out some things happening here that relate to one another. And is there anything that you do in your industry that I can apply in mine? And there almost always is, because the principles of learning and success and development are, fairly, I think, universal concepts.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed that same thing in the podcast that I've listened to as well. Are you taking anything you're learning from the podcasts that you're doing and adding them into your book that you're doing now?
Not this one.
Oh, okay.
I've already written the first draft, so the concepts are already pretty set. Right now, I'm mostly focusing on building up the podcast, building up sort of automation of social media, and figuring out how I can do all of the necessary nitty-gritty work to make all of this stuff a functional business, essentially.
Sure.
So that I can support the book and have a good platform to release it on, because I'm happy with the ideas that I've put together in it. They're primarily excuse me, they're primarily around learning theory concepts, and I think they can help, and I want them to help. So I'm mostly setting the book aside for a little bit so that the book can succeed. That's sort of my mindset behind it right now. So I'm hoping to grow the podcast, hoping to meet with other podcasters like you to explore ideas and grow, so that I can release the book to a good audience.
Sure. Seems like a good plan. Do you not think, is the TikTok audience not really the same audience that would enjoy a book, or is it more of, is that why you're branching out to the podcast and stuff? Or is it more like, hey, I need multiple, kind of like having multiple income streams, but multiple social media streams? Because like one of the things I noticed is, I remember when you started Twitter, you were like, I'm going to take over Twitter. You kind of made a declaration, and I thought that was fantastic when you did that.
Thank you. Yeah, that conquering act hasn't fully sorted itself out yet. Mm. Maybe I'll still manage to conquer Twitter. We'll see. Mm-hmm. I'm trying.
Yeah,
doing my best. Fighting a little war there. So we'll see. But it's not that I think TikTok is a bad audience. Actually, I think TikTok is possibly one of the most exciting audiences.
Oh yeah,
because it's so new, it's so different. We still don't know what the communication between a creator on TikTok and his or her audience is going to be fully. Like, we haven't sorted that out yet, which is so delightful to explore. But yes, like you said, building out some stability. I do have ideas, that can't fully be shared on TikTok, right? That not everything can be packaged in a minute. Mm-hmm. So I do want to have that longer form of expression. And also some of it is me trying to apply the concept I mentioned earlier about, like, well, who am I to think that I know what I'm doing? And, yes, I've amassed an audience on TikTok, and that's just been incredible. But I can't take it for granted that means that I'm winning, going to win, in releasing this book.
Sure.
Just because of that. So I'm just trying to do the best that I can to present it to the right people, and I want to keep creating for TikTok. I think I actually want that to be one of my biggest focuses. But yeah, I'm just trying to broaden out to connect to as many folks as I can.
That makes total sense. Speaking of TikTok, how do you? So one of my favorite TikToks of yours is, I guess you'd call it Master of Things, and it's where you were talking about, where you break the spine of the book and you let the student know that we are the master of things, and things aren't the masters of us. And I thought, wow, what an amazing concept. I wish I had someone like you to teach me that when I was young, because it's like I was always the kid who was like, hey, I'm not going to break the spine of this book. I'm going to make sure it stays nice and things like that. And it's like, wow, you can actually just take things and do what you want with them. And that's kind of what they're there for. It's such a good lesson. But so my question basically is, how do you come up with your ideas like that? Where do they come from? Do you like write them out at night, or is it like a brainstorm session kind of thing?
Well, the ideas come from a couple different places. And one is I do want to factor in psychology, and I do believe that people are born differently, and we all have strengths in different areas. So I think partially I might just have a mind that's sort of wired to have the ideas bubbling up here and there, and that's a strength, and that's wonderful. With it comes all sorts of weaknesses. Like I wasn't very good at applying my ideas, and it took me years and years of like really struggling to get any sort of ability to maintain control over my idea flow. So it's, everybody has those strengths and weaknesses. So I think that I do have some natural inclination for it, but I think I also did some things that made it more likely that I could come up with an idea. And one was I tried a lot of things. I was a constantly curious, fascinated person. So I would just try stuff. And that resulted in me getting sort of a wider education maybe than average. And then the next thing is, like you, I also write songs. And I went through a period of time when I was writing a song every day. And I did that for quite a while. And as you know, that you can very quickly, when you commit to something like that, run across a day when you're like, well, I don't have a song in me today. What do I do? And so I started studying how to come up with an idea. And one of the tools that I ended up using the most was mind mapping. And I'd go through that process of, just writing one word on a page, feather. And then, okay, what comes to mind when you think of the word feather? And it's like, okay, light. All right. So now that we have the word light, well, what comes to mind with the word light? And now, you might bounce up to a totally different direction. Like you might say red because, well, there's red light. And originally, we had one meaning of the word light, which is light as in less weight. But we transferred that to light, the emanation. And learning to let go and free associate that way, where it's like, take one thing, what does that bring to mind? What does that bring to mind? What does that bring to mind? It's a way of exploring sort of what's in your head, and then if you go down that rabbit hole for a while, usually you can come across something that your mind grabs onto, and that's usually the thing that you're interested in. And there is your idea, and I gotten to the point where I was free associating entire sentences, where like I'd write a sentence and then I'd say, okay, what does that make me think of? And then I'd write a new sentence and I'd go, what does that make me think of? And I wouldn't remain attached to the original sentence, and that would allow me to go down new rabbit holes and new paths to ideate, to find what I wanted. So that was something that I explored a ton. And that had some interesting side effects, where I found that I was more easily able to have things pop to mind, where, somebody would bring up one concept and, two or three other concepts would pop into my head being connected to it. And people would say, how did you make that connection? And I think it was through process, and practice. So that was a big one for me, was learning that concept of association. Another of being able to come up with ideas is indeed the letting go of perfectionism, because perfectionism just totally kills ideas. Mm-hmm. And then let's see what else. There's a couple other things. So this is also different based on personality type. Mm-hmm. But what I found that is, if you're an idea person, when it comes time to do a project, if you've made an idea list, then when you want to go create your project and you're using that old idea, often you'll feel sad, because now your old idea is the boss and you have to just carry it out, and you want to come up with a brilliant new idea. So right now on TikTok, I am, I'd say 90% of the time, never planning the TikToks. I'm never planning what I'm going to write because I'm trying to give myself the freedom to feel powerful, feel like I'm taking an action that I have power over by I'm not writing down a lot of ideal lists, and I am just devoting time to coming up with the idea that day. I do now sometimes write ideal lists, but when I initially started doing this, if I came up with an idea and wrote it down, I'd throw away the paper because I found that for people that are super idea oriented, sometimes idea lists actually make them feel like they don't get to do the fun part when it comes time to really do the work.
Yeah, the fun part's important. So with that kind of mindset, I don't suppose you ever just take a look at your TikToks and go, well, this one did well, maybe I should do one like this. Is that tempting, or is that something you don't even think about?
I absolutely do it. It's an important part of the process. It's like you're making love to someone, and they you do something and you see that it feels good to them. It's like, okay, never do that thing again. It's like that's not the right path,
Right.
That's not a good idea. So and sometimes for the creative person, it sort of feels that way where it's like, oh, I can't do that again. I've done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, you don't want to go that far down that rabbit hole. And I think the reason why creatives go that far down the rabbit hole is because they don't feel free.
Mm-hmm.
They don't feel like they get to make what they want to make. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to work really hard to give myself the freedom. I'm trying to work really hard to reinforce to my mind that, no, you're not shackled to a particular subject. You're not shackled to a particular thing you have to create. But we can go down these rabbit holes of your interest where we can create things that are more and more satisfying, both for you and a much more satisfying interaction for the audience. So I do look for things that people respond well to, because I have plenty more to say on that thing. There are some things that people respond to well that I've chosen not to, like stock picking, for example. I've noticed that anytime I mention a ticker symbol of a stock, it suddenly the comments just turn into a football game, which it's like I don't know, it just gets so boring to me that I know I could get success going down that path, but it's like it becomes so it's like those tourist events where you go in for the dinner to watch the old like knights bashing against each other, and you're the red team and they're the blue team, and it's like it's fun for a night and a dinner, but like I don't want my my creative process to be defined by that kind of behavior, and like that's sort of super common in the stock picking world. So there's some things that I chose not to, even though they did really well. But most of the things, it's like I've noticed people respond really powerfully to these concepts about setting boundaries and becoming dangerous. And it's like, God, I'm happy to talk more about that. Like,
sure,
we need to know more about that. We need to know that like a person can, tap into their power, and that's not a bad thing. We need to know that a person can risk behaving in a powerful way, and they actually can't succeed without taking that risk.
Right.
We need to know that that's an option, and I've noticed that when I make stuff talking about that, people kind of wake up a little bit, and that's incredibly exciting to me, and it makes me want to make more stuff like that.
Sure.
So it's I am slowly giving myself creative bumpers that allow me to like align my ideas and get a little bit more focused. But I'm doing it in a way that makes me still feel like I'm steering my own ship. And I think for the creative, that's, I mean, for anyone, it's just incredibly valuable to know that, you've chosen the path that you're on.
For sure. Yeah, I talk about that a lot on this podcast, is becoming one with the monster, becoming, not pushing it down, but being part of it and, giving it attention that it needs. But I think one of the things about the way you talk about it that's interesting, and I was kind of going through your TikTok today and looking at some comments and stuff, and you'll have this almost profile view, this side view, and but when you want to make a point, you'll stare right at the camera, and you'll do that with the talking about those kind of more dangerous things. But I did notice, like, you get some trolls sometimes saying, like, can you ever just face the camera? And it's like, and I think the one I saw, you were just like, no. And I thought that was fantastic. But is that like a way to deal with trolls, is just kind of talk with them, or do you just, what do you do to deal with trolls? Because I know a lot of people who are doing media like this have trouble with trolls and dealing with it and stuff like that.
I'm going to say something about the side profile first.
Okay.
Because I think it's valuable in the context of what we were talking about earlier when I mentioned that giving up thing. Mm-hmm. I want to be clear and open about this, that it wasn't a grand plan for me to do side profile. It wasn't. It's now like practically branded on TikTok. Like people message me where they're like, I'm afraid to copy you. Like, I love this, but I'm afraid to like copy you. Like, I don't want to step on your side profile. I'm like, wow, okay. I appreciate the respect there of what I've done. Sure, but obviously, it has become a thing. It's weird to say, but it has. Mm-hmm. But I want to be clear that happened because I gave up. And what I did was I went, oh, I stutter when I look at the camera. Maybe I won't. And I came to the realization that, well, okay, one of the biggest struggles I had even in music school was memory. I've always struggled to do rote memorization. I can memorize concepts like nobody's business. Like learn a concept and retain it. Like, I can do that extremely well. Mm-hmm. But you want to remember a date? Like, I barely know my own birthday and social security number. I really like it's super hard for me to retain just simple numbers, facts. Like don't ask me to cite my sources. Jesus, like I can't remember where I found that fact. Like, the fact was the interesting part. I don't remember where I got it from.
Right.
Like, my brain does not operate based on those structures. It's more conceptual, right?
Sure.
So what I realized is like, I'm fighting this weakness over and over and over again in my life of memory. Why am I fighting this? Like, yes, it's good to build up your weaknesses sometimes, but most of your life you should be leaning on your strengths. And I wasn't leaning on my strengths at all. So what I did was I pulled up a document and I wrote something down and I read it out. And then I looked at the camera for the part that I could remember.
Wow.
And that's how I got I also looked at the camera because I thought it would look neat.
Yeah.
But like, that basic structure came about through a process of me being willing to be a little bit more humble and let go of the things that I couldn't do and do what I could. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to add that because I think it really exemplifies well this idea of giving up in a positive way. So far as trolls go, I do have some strong beliefs about how to deal with trolls. And my primary one is only interact with trolls to the degree that it makes you better.
Okay.
That's it.
It makes you better?
Yes. So if you say something with a troll and you feel good that you've said it. Like you feel stronger. And I realize, like, this could go too far where it's like you're just bashing people all day.
Mm-hmm.
But that's different. That's going into a toxicity that's going to have a negative side effect for you down the road. But if you make your interactions things that make you stronger, things that make you feel better, then great. And if you're not doing that, then why are you doing it? Because you have no responsibility to respond to people on the internet that talk about, how you look like you haven't showered in 3 days when you showered 30 seconds before making the video. Like,
mm-hmm.
like, why do we need to answer to that? We don't. It's not your job. You're not required in any way, shape, or form to do that. So I don't engage very often with people that make negative comments, but I do occasionally if I feel like I can say something that's, brightens the world a little bit. And I think it's super funny to just say straight up no to the request of a jerk on the internet. I think it's hilarious. And
it gave me a chuckle.
I've noticed that a lot of people respond with amusement to that. So it's just a moment of fun to state my stance on something where it's like, I'm going to do what I want, and I think that's important. That's my basic belief around trolls is interact with them only to the degree that they make you better. And if you can't have an interaction with a troll that makes you better, then don't interact with trolls.
That sounds like good advice for most situations interacting with people. But,
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask my questions I ask everyone at the end. And some people find this easy, some people find it difficult. But is there anything I should have asked you today, but I did not ask you?
Oh, man. That's a good question.
Yeah, it tends to throw some people, but
I enjoyed the questions that you asked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you asked the right ones.
Oh.
So no.
Okay. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some people equate that question to, I had a guy once say, oh, well, I like to go to restaurants, and I ask, can you ask the chef if you could have anybody order anything they want off the menu, what would they order? And the chef would say, I order this, and that's what the person would get. And that's kind of like the idea behind the question is to, just see if the other person's thinking, oh, I wish he would ask me about whatever, because I have a really good answer for this,
Yeah, no. Well, I enjoyed the rabbit holes that we explored.
Yeah.
I would say that, I could happily explore further that rabbit hole of becoming dangerous and learning to do things like simple things like saying no. Because it's funny. It's funny that you pointed that out, right? Because it's such a simple thing that, a troll commented on one of my posts and I said no to it. And yet it was noteworthy enough that you would mention it in a podcast. It was noteworthy enough that people would bring it up in conversations. Why is that? Well, I mean, maybe because we're not doing that. Maybe because there's a huge lack of that type of behavior in the world, of this behavior of just strongly standing for something, and making a choice, being decisive, and backing it up with some element of power. And it's kind of absurd that a simple no would be seen as all of those things. But I think that in this case, a lot of people do take quite a bit from that, because I've had it brought up to me more than once, that people have mentioned, me giving a simple no to trolls as being, entertaining and cool and a bunch of other things. And I think that we are in a sort of phase of our society where we want to add a disclaimer to everything, where, we say no, but I just want to make sure, like, I'm not trying to offend you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that you understand that, like, there are reasons why I said no. And it's like, no. And my answer is no.
Right.
And that's okay. And there's a whole bunch tied to that. There's a whole bunch tied to a willingness to say something simple and let it be. One of the things that's critical that's tied to it is the risk of collateral damage, right? So the disclaimer on the McDonald's coffee cup is a risk reduction technique. This funny phrase that says, caution, coffee is hot. Right. And we go, well, obviously it's hot. And also, like, I kind of hate to pick on McDonald's for that one, because I heard that actually their coffee was legitimately, like, way hotter than it would ever need to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea stands that it's a ridiculous disclaimer of caution, coffee is hot.
Right.
And we're doing this risk reduction everywhere. And we know in investing that you can't have outsized returns. You can't have larger amounts of money coming your way without taking on more risk. Risk and return are sort of linked in different ways. There are tricks you can play to reduce your risk, but generally every trick you play that reduces your risk also reduces your return to some degree. And that is the same in life, where we do have to be willing to risk. We have to be willing to take chances, and in order to move forwards and in order to get things that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at its core, risking is essentially choice, and choice is tied to sacrifice, where when you make a choice, you're letting go of something that could have happened every time you make a choice. And that thing that you let go of might have been important, and that's your risk, right?
Yes.
So when we choose to risk, we're being dangerous. We're being really dangerous, and it's scary, but it's the only way to move forwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that all of that is wrapped up in this little concept of just stating what you want. And one of the great risks of stating what you want and letting it be is the risk that it will be taken the wrong way. And it's the risk of collateral damage. And these things come with making a statement and leaving it there. And we have to run that risk if we make a statement and leave it there. But if we don't make statements and just leave them there, if we don't, draw a line in the sand and say, hey, this is what I think, if we don't ever do that, then we slowly lose our identities, I believe. Because every time you disclaim, you're making the view of who you are a little bit muddier, right? So every time you say, I believe this, but also this, and this, and I think because of this, and I don't want you to get a wrong idea about this. What we're doing is we're taking like like you're painting in watercolor, and you've drawn something clear here. You're taking a brush with water in it, and you're just like rubbing all over it. You're just like muddying the waters and spreading the paints all over the place. And it's like, sometimes you want to do that because, sometimes there's a, situation where a little bit of diplomacy is required, but you can't just turn yourself into, a tepid pool of mixed watercolor paints that, always, you mix enough watercolor paints, it just turns to muddy brown, right?
Yeah.
You don't want your life to be like that.
Right.
And I think that tapping into a little bit of personal power and a little bit of danger so that you feel strong enough to risk something, and you learn that like risk is a natural element of life and action, then you can understand that risking collateral damage and risking offense is part of the game of life. Then you can go into an interaction and say something that you believe. And that's, I think, the moment that you offer something to the world.
That's intense. Fantastic. Well, anyway, thank you so much for being here, Josh. I really appreciate it. That's a perfect note to go out on, I think.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too. So we'll look for you on TikTok, and I'll have links and everything on the podcast and whatnot. And thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
All right. You have a good one.
You too.